We will be discussing the anatomy of the bell fruit this morning. Not long ago we talked about the onion, so I thought to sweeten things up a little bit, we'll switch to the bell fruit. This is one of the analogies that Sri Ramakrishna uses very commonly. We come across it several times in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. I'm sure you all know what the bell fruit is. Huh? It's a little hard outer shell, and then you crack it open, and inside there's kind of an orangey, little bit stringy, fleshy kind of thing, and seeds inside. And I actually Googled it to see what they do, that they can pull it out and they can take out the seeds and smash it up, add a little water and a little sugar, some mint, some other things, and they make a beautiful drink, a sherbet out of it. I know this mostly from being at Belur Math on Shivratri, that very commonly it'll be there to break the fast, or those who don't do a complete fast, they can drink some of the sherbet through the night. And so Sri Ramakrishna, he must have, of course, been very familiar with this, how they make this sherbet, and how you have to, a little bit like a coconut almost. You have to crack the hard outer shell, and then you take the flesh out and you remove the seeds. So this is the analogy that Sri Ramakrishna used many times to explain the relationship between the world, Jagat, which is the hard outer shell, and the seeds, which are the different jivas, and the flesh, the meat of the bell fruit, which will be Brahman, the absolute reality. And he talks about getting the full weight of the bell fruit. This is the real intention of the whole analogy, that if we say that the flesh is the only real thing, we discard the other things, then we don't get the full weight. So the very common analogy that we find in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. In the chapter called The Last Visit to Keshav, this is November 28th, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna was talking to one of the neighbors who asked him a question regarding the world. Namely, why should we dismiss the world as Maya, as some of the Vigyanis do? So according to the Vigyanis, that this world is somehow misinterpretation, that there's something false about transitory, asat, mithya, that we have to get rid of this and go beyond it in order to realize the absolute reality. So Sri Ramakrishna here, he replies by referring again to the bell fruit analogy. And here, he talks about the worldview of the Vigyani, of the God-realized soul. He explains it in terms of the higher type of vision, that this idea of discarding the asat in order to get to sat. He says, fine, this is what we do on the spiritual path, but when we have that ultimate realization and come back and look at the world, then this is that state of Vigyana. So he says that Jnani may dismiss the world as Maya in order to realize this unchanging reality. But the Vigyani, he comes back and has a whole different way of looking at things. So this is the exact quote from that chapter, Last Visit to Keshav. As long as one has not realized God, one should renounce the world. Now, renounce the world, I don't think means renounce the world. The word is tyaga, but I think it means somehow reject, somehow intellectually, that we say this world is something separate from Brahman. He's not talking about renouncing the world to become a monk. Anyhow, one should renounce the world following the process of neti, not this. But he who has attained God knows that it is God who has become all this. Then he sees God, Maya, living beings, and the universe form one whole. He sees that it includes the universe and its living beings. Suppose you have separated the shell, flesh, and seeds of a bell fruit, and someone asks you the weight of the fruit. Will you leave aside the shell and the seeds and weigh only the flesh? Not at all. To know the real weight of the fruit, you must weigh the whole of it, the shell, the flesh, and the seeds. Only then can you tell its real weight. The shell may be likened to the universe, and the seeds to living beings. While one is engaged in discrimination, one says to oneself that the universe and the living beings are non-self and unsubstantial at that time. Then one thinks of the flesh alone as the substance, and the shell and seeds as unsubstantial. But after discrimination is over, one feels that all three parts of the fruit together form a unity. Then one further realizes that the stuff that has produced the flesh of the fruit has also produced the shell and seeds. To know the real nature of the bell fruit, one must know all three. So this is a direct quote from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, page 327 and 328. Now, as I said, we find this analogy used several different times. It's very interesting to see that perhaps the last instance that we have is in response to a question asked by Narendra, later Swami Vivekananda. This is on March 11th, 1885. And Sri Ramakrishna had just made a very interesting statement. He said that the non-dualistic interpretation of Vedanta of Shankaracharya, what we call Advaita Vedanta, is true. And then he says, and so is the qualified non-dualistic interpretation of Ramanuja, Vishishta Dvaitavad. Apparently, as we would understand, Narendra listened to this. Apparently, Narendra didn't know much about this qualified non-dualism, Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta of Ramanuja. So he asked him, what is Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta? And Sri Ramakrishna exclaimed, it is the theory of Ramanuja. According to this theory, Brahman, or the Absolute, is qualified by the universe and its living beings. Vishishta, that means it has vishesha, it has attributes and qualities. Universe and living beings somehow are thought of as these attributes or qualities of Brahman. These three, Brahman, the world, and living beings, together constitute one. Then he gives the same bell fruit example. So, first time, it's to explain the state of the Vigyani, and the second time, it's to explain the doctrine of qualified non-dualism. Now, this, of course, gives us the feeling that perhaps they're one and the same, that he's saying that you can be a follower of Shankaracharya till you get to the roof. When you come back down, you'll be a follower of Ramanuja. But this is too simplistic. I don't think that this is exactly what Sri Ramakrishna is trying to say. So he gives this, and then he adds one thing at the end. He says, the Nitya and the Lila are the two aspects of one and the same reality. Therefore, according to Ramanuja, Brahman is qualified by the universe and the living beings. This is the theory of qualified non-dualism. So, according to this idea, Brahman is essentially Saguna. This Saguna Brahman, they may accept the Nirguna aspect, but Saguna Brahman will be the essential thing. At the Advaita Vedanta, it's reversed, a little bit upside down. They look at things from two different points of view. We have two very nice analogies. The analogy for Advaita Vedanta is one which actually Sri Ramakrishna gives. So we shouldn't think that he didn't like this Advaita Vedanta. It's a very nice example. He says, why when we look at the sky do we see it as having a color? Why does it look blue? And he says, because we're looking at it from a distance. If the closer we go, the more that we see that there's no color at all to it. Or water. The ocean, it'll look blue or green from a distance. We take the water, there's no color at all. Now, the dualists, they also have a very interesting way of explaining the same thing from the point of view of distance. There's a very nice analogy, I don't know, I think it's from the Chaitanya school, that Krishna sees somebody walking from a great distance, and it's so far that he can't recognize any of the characteristics, can't see the face or anything, can't recognize who it is. But as the person gets closer and closer and closer, he says, oh, it's my friend Narada. So they'll say that this Nirguna aspect, without qualities is because we're too far away from it. When we get closer and closer to that real reality, we'll see that the saguna, that it has form. There's a very nice line that I read recently. I don't know where it's from. I quote Swami, you know this, the Bhuteshananji Maharaj a lot, because I'm reading that book. He quotes this line from somewhere in the Vaishnava literature. Yad advaitam brahma upanishadi tadapi asya tanubhaha. The non-dual Brahman that's found in the Upanishads, that Advaita Brahma Upanishad that's found in the Upanishads, is nothing but the Asya refers to Krishna, and Tanubha is nothing but that glow emanating from the body of Sri Krishna. This is how they'll explain this Nirguna Brahman, that the real reality is Saguna, but this beautiful glow of light is a very beautiful idea. Very poetic, but philosophically it'll be a little bit loggerheads with this Advaita position. Anyhow, Sri Ramakrishna, he's explaining all this, and then he follows up by saying that I see God directly, so there's really no need for me to get too involved in these philosophical doctrines. Now, how do we understand all of this? Do we really try to think, did Thakur, was he a follower of Ramanuja? Was he a follower of Shankaracharya? Did he care about these things? Why does he use this analogy? Why does he use other analogies that seem to contradict this one? How do we understand his use of this bell fruit example? Is it just for the Vigyani? Is it Ramanuja? It can be a complicated thing and raises different types of questions. And finally, is there a different way of looking at this? Another way we can understand this analogy of the bell fruit. Let me first go through a little bit of this doctrine of qualified non-dualism that is expounded by Ramanuja, which is based on the Upanishads. Upanishads, Gita, Brahma Sutra. The Upanishads read like poetry, and they leave a lot of room for interpretation. And any of the three schools, Madhva, the dualists, they can all point to different verses and different stories and things which will help them support their own view. And they can twist the text a little bit also for other things they don't like to help their own point of view. So this is also part of Vedanta. When we talk about Vedanta, it doesn't necessarily mean Advaita Vedanta. This is something that points to the tremendous influence of Shankaracharya that we really identify nowadays, and Thakur in his day also. There's a Vedanta in the Upanishads with Advaita Vedanta, but all the schools can find some ground for their theory there. Anyhow, this is called qualified non-dualism. Why is it a non-dualistic system? Only because they accept Brahman itself as the sole reality. But there's internal distinctions within. So if we look at that from the point of view that there are many different jivas, the seeds, and there's a real distinction. The Advaita Vedanta, they won't give this real distinction. So the outer shell is real. The inner seeds are real, the universe and living beings, but they're all somehow within Brahman, or they're qualifying Brahman somehow. So from one point of view, it's a non-dualistic system, but in reality, it's closer to a dualistic system. Any system that says there's an ultimate distinction between individual jivas, jiva and God, this will be a dualistic system. And one of the real quarrels among the different schools is what happens in the state of liberation. That the bhakti schools, they don't like this idea you'll disappear into the ocean of Brahman. If the jiva is separate, then he can have some separate individuality in the state of liberation also. So anyhow, they have their quarrels and different ways of looking at things a little bit. So because of this internal distinction and the different qualities of Brahman, we can say it's really a dualistic school. That we say qualified non-dualism, but it really Advaita Vedanta is the only non-dualistic school, and this gives full reality to the jivas and to living beings, even though it belongs to Brahman. somehow. Now, Advaita Vedanta will not give this same type of ultimate reality to what we call the world, Jagat, and what we call jivas. We know all of the doctrines of false superimposition and how the individual jiva feels separate because of false identification with all the coverings, the body, mind, senses, and the ego and everything. And Thakur, as much as he likes the bell fruit, he'll also say that what separates one from another is this stick of ego lying on the surface of water, that ultimately there's just this ocean of water. So we'll find Thakur agreeing with this also. So the status of the universe in Advaita Vedanta, either it'll be looked upon as Maya somehow, or some type of manifestation of Brahman, but it'll be changeful, and it won't have that same status as the Brahman. They won't be on an equal footing. So we have this idea that taking this universe and taking the jivas, somehow adding them all up together, you're going to get something more than Brahman itself. We have this very well-known Vedic mantra, Shanti mantra, Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamadachyate. This is kind of a mathematical type of formula that this Purnamada, that this ultimate transcendent reality, which we call the Brahman, is perfect and full and complete, the Purna. And Purnam, this universe that we see, also perfect and complete. It's almost as if we have a Sankhya doctrine where the two things side by side. But they'll be taken as one coming from the other somehow, this whole visible universe. Purnasya Puramadaya, if we remove it, Purnameva Avashishyate, that we remain with that same infinite reality. So we're taking the infinite, we're subtracting the infinite, and it remains infinite. Now, is a little bit, the math is confusing. How do we subtract the infinite from the infinite? But the point is that nothing is gained or lost, whether the universe exists and the individual jivas, or they don't exist. And we have so many different examples of this in Advaita Vedanta. One of the examples that we find in Vivekachudamani of Shankaracharya is that he compares the rise and fall of the universe to the rise and fall of a wave. So a wave rises, and just for how long does it take? That's one complete cycle of the universe. And it falls, that means there's a pralaya, that there's no manifestation of that wave. So everything is like a wave on the ocean. Now, if we take the total mass of the ocean when it's broken out into waves, and we take the total mass of the ocean when the wave subsides, it'll be exactly, the weight will be the same. We're not adding anything, we're not subtracting anything. So this is one of the illustrations that we get. And the explanation also is that what are we adding on to Brahman in order to get the universe and to get living beings? Nama Rupa, name and form. These don't add anything to the weight. These don't add anything at all. Gold, we have another example that when we take gold and we turn it into gold jewelry, the weight is the same. You know, in India, even today, I think, but ancient India, a person measured his wealth by the gold jewelry that his wife had. And it didn't matter what shape it was in, it was just the weight of it that was the value of it. And they could always take that jewelry and they could take it to a jeweler and melt it down, and it would turn into something else. And it didn't matter. If it was a necklace, if it was a bracelet, a bangle, it didn't matter. Whatever the weight was, that was the value of it. So this Namarupa, the name and the form, they don't change anything with regard to the ultimate value of it. And then one very stark Vedantic example is the snake in the rope. That we all know this illustration, that if somebody It's walking down the road in twilight, and there's a rope lying on the ground, and thinks that it's a snake, and goes up and examines it very clearly and sees that there's no snake at all, that there's a rope. Now, when we've eliminated the snake from the rope, does the rope weigh any less? So what have we eliminated? Only our own ignorance. Our own ignorance. So this seems to fly in the face of this other idea that when we eliminate the distinctiveness of the individual, when we eliminate the manifestation of the universe, that we're getting in less weight, that we've eliminated something. If we take all of this very literally, this idea of weighing and all of that. So we seem to have two very mutually exclusive and contradictory views of the world, with Shankaracharya and Ramanuja, and they would fight each other. Of course, they didn't live at the same period with their followers. This was a very big thing, who was right and who was wrong. This is what the philosophers do. They have these big debates and these big arguments, and they really can't agree to anything. So how is it that Sri Ramakrishna said they're both right? And he accepted both and actually followed. He followed all of the different paths according to the different philosophical traditions in India. We know that Thakur was very bad at mathematics. As a young boy, Godai, when he could learn a little bit of addition, he couldn't learn anything about subtraction, and multiplication was impossible. But I don't think we can explain all this in terms of his inability to do math. There are other ways that we can understand this, that I think Thakur would be very happy with the math of the gold and the gold jewelry. He would understand that, of course. And this other idea of weighing the bell fruit, he'll understand that, of course. Now, one way of explaining all of this is that Sri Ramakrishna did not identify these philosophical traditions and systems with any ultimate truth. The truth for him went beyond all doctrines and all ideas. It was direct realization that each one is a different path. And we have to look at each one from within that system, and we have to understand it as the followers understand it. And from the worldview of the person who's expounding this doctrine, and we follow it that way, it can take us to the highest goal. This is all Sri Ramakrishna cared about. He didn't care if one seemed to contradict the other. So we end up with this idea that we don't choose a philosophical system because it can defeat the other in argumentation. It has to appeal to us. It has to make sense to us. We have to be able to digest it. So Thakur used had this little formula, Ruchi Bheda. We all have different type of taste, and Hajam Shakti, we all have different powers of digestion with food. So we have to choose the one that works for us. Some people, they'll be better off looking at things through the worldview of Ramanuja, because we all feel that we're separate. We feel this world to be real. So it works not just for the Vigyani, but for everybody. And Thakur, he also agrees that not that this separation is real, but this sense of I keeps coming back. So he's very practical. So from that point of view, we can understand all of this. So Sri Ramakrishna, he liked all of these. He looked at all of them as a means of climbing to the roof. His famous statement, Jotoma Totopot. This doesn't mean just all the different religions that he practiced. It means all of these schools of Vedanta equally as well, that they're all different paths. Mot Pot, he had a very nice, very simple explanation. Mot Pot is that this mata is a philosophical system or a faith tradition or anything, but it can be a Dvaita Vedanta, it can be Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta. It's a path for him, for Sri Ramakrishna. This is not an ultimate truth. So this neti, that we look upon all these things as unreal, that's true in the fact that it's effective, that it can get us to the roof. It's not a final truth. And coming back down, seeing this world as a manifestation of God, that's true from that point of view. It doesn't negate the fact that Brahman is the alone sole reality, Because the Vigyani also has a sense of I. Thakur says that. He keeps that ego of knowledge or of devotion, and from that point of view, we'll see variety everywhere. That doesn't mean that that's ultimately real, but from that point of view. So Thakur's understanding of things is completely different. He gives that illustration that all of these different worldviews, they're like different preparation to fish that the mother makes for the child, knowing that the child, one likes a certain type, one likes another type of fish, different preparation. One has a bad stomach and can't take very rich food. And then Thakur afterwards says, but I like all preparations of fish. So he appreciated and liked all of the different spiritual paths. And so from that point of view, we can say that, yes, when he's looking at things the way Ramanuja would look at things, then he'll accept it one way. When he's looking at it from the other side, he'll accept it in a different way. So we can say, and another thing I read from Swami Swahananda, that Sri Ramakrishna accepted all of these different paths, that he was an Advaitin, he was a Vishishta Advaitin, he was a Advaitin, not that he merged them all at the same time, and not that he tried to eliminate all the differences, but at different times practicing in different ways, and he saw them all as different spiritual paths. Thakur was very fond of this verse that's attributed to Hanuman, that Hanuman was asked one time, he was taken to the court where Sri Rama was there and everyone is around, and Rama asked him, how do you look upon me? And he said, Deha buddhya tu dasoham. When I feel myself to be this body, so it all depends where my mindset. And then you're the master and I'm the servant. Jiva buddhya twadang shakaha. When I feel I'm an individual soul, then you're the whole and I'm a part of you. And atma buddhya tvamevaham. When I think of myself as the Atman, then you and I are one and the same. Iti me nishtita matihi. This is my finished final opinion, that all three are true, but not at one at the same time. For Sri Ramakrishna, the dualistic attitude is true, but is grounded on this non-dualism. If we want to at least attribute that much of a philosophy to him, we can say that even knowing myself, to thinking of myself as the servant, I know deep down that it's because of this stick of ego lying on the surface. We can at least say that much. So this is one way to explain how these two doctrines can be accepted in different ways. But I don't think it's enough, because it's such a stark distinction between saying that there's only one, Brahman is homogeneous, there's no internal change whatsoever, that we can understand that Jagat and Jiva in terms of Maya and all of that, and the other saying that no, Brahman has these attributes, just like a person has a body and not everything, that Brahman has these attributes. So I think there's another way that we can understand this, and that is by not taking this idea of weighing the different parts, taking that so literally, and coming up with some type of idea that Thakur is saying that we don't get the full picture, that we're denying ourselves something, that we're limiting ourselves to just one way of looking at things. You remember when he would talk to the Brahmos, he used to say to them, yes, you like this, there's a formless God and everything, it's fine, it's okay, but it's like a musician just playing one note of the flute when it has all the different notes. So he liked to see all of the different variety of things, and he liked to be very all-inclusive with everything. So we can say that even if he accepts this idea, say with gold, that the real value of gold is the weight which doesn't change. Now, if we do that, if we say that somebody says, oh, how do you like that gold bracelet that I bought for you? We say, oh, it's okay. It weighed 22 carats. Well, I don't know how they weigh that. But what about the beauty of it? What about the artistry? Huh? That's for us, and for most people, I would say, that this is the value of gold jewelry, that how beautifully it's made with such skill and everything. If we don't consider that, we're not getting the full weight of the bell fruit. So forget about this idea, is name and form real, is it unreal? But from a very practical point of view, that if we don't do that, then we're cheating ourselves a little bit. And I think that Sri Ramakrishna meant that. I don't think he wanted us to feel that, oh no, this is the final position, and that he really liked this idea, this Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta. Of course, he liked this idea that Brahman has Shakti together. We know that. But there's this tendency, and when we read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, especially in the Bengali, that whenever this bell fruit example is there, M, we'll put a little heading that Thakur is explaining Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta. And I have a feeling that M, although M, of course, understood all of this, but M felt that Thakur's teachings were maybe more in line with Ramanuja than with Shankaracharya. It's just a little feeling that I have. And I think, of course, I'm not one to criticize M in any way. M was one of the playmates in Thakur's Leela. But I like this other way of looking at it, that Thakur didn't have any fixed philosophical position, except for the fact that he didn't want to limit anything. That with Nirguna, Saguna, Brahma, we have to see both. Personal, impersonal, both. Nitya, Lila, both. And if we don't see it that way, then we're not getting the full weight. So we can take it that way. So this Advaitic position that this universe is nothing but Brahman. It's not added on to Brahman. This is something that Thakur is a daily direct experience. He saw this universe as Chinmaya. He saw it as the embodiment of pure consciousness. He saw it as Brahman itself. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. He saw it that way. So how could he say that it's just an overlay, a superimposition, that it's like the shell of the bell fruit if he saw things this way? So I think that we have to take it on this other way of looking at it, that not from the point of view of the philosophers, but how we want to approach life. Do we want to just sit with our eyes closed and think Brahman is the impersonal absolute and everything else is Maya and we're being deceived by it? Or do we want to embrace everything? I think it's more helpful, at least for me, to take it in that sense. So one of Sri Ramakrishna's main positions, he did have some positions, he wasn't the complete relativist, is that we cannot limit Brahman or reality to only one aspect. That if it's formless, then it can take form. If it has form, that's grounded on formlessness. That the impersonal God, personal, the Brahman and Bhagavan and Ishvara, that they're all part of one and the same reality, that there's no ultimate distinction between them. So there is something called Nirguna Brahman, and this is the ground of everything. But within the heart of that, there is something which Ramakrishna likes to call Shakti. That if we simply start with Nirguna Brahman, then Brahman is infinite absolute reality, no internal change, no niriha, actionless, can't do anything, then we can't explain anything. So Sri Ramakrishna says that we can't eliminate the Shakti aspect. So these are the two things that he's very clear, that the Brahman and Shakti are abhed, that we can't separate the two of them, we can't see one without the other. And the Saguna aspect for Sri Ramakrishna is the one that's a little more appealing. If we just stick with this Nirguna, then he seems to feel, he kind of identifies that with the Brahma Samaj people. That a little bit dry, that the Saguna aspect, that God can manifest in so many different ways of worshiping God, not just manifest as the universe and living beings, but all the different divine incarnations, all of the different deities, different ways of worshiping Shiva and Kali and Durga and everything, that this is the beauty of it. This is the nature of God, is like the Bahurupi, the chameleon can change its colors. That it's like the dye, whatever we dip our cloth in, it comes out a different color. If we just say, no, Brahman is like the dye, which has no color, then we miss the whole point, that it has that tremendous ability to dye things in all different colors. So we get different examples of this. That one is the sun. If we take the sun to be just pure light, and Sri Ramakrishna says that the light of the sun is colorless. It's invisible. We can't see it. So this is like Brahman. This is our Nirguna Brahman. Now, if we stop with that, then are we getting the full weight? Because this light, which has no color, when it passes through a prism, comes out all the different colors of the rainbow. So that Shakti, that power to manifest in such a beautiful way, not just deceiving. It's not just that, through this veil of Maya, now we're seeing everything falsely, that we're seeing all the... No, it's that power of light that contains within it all the different colors. So Sri Ramakrishna, I think, is saying, if we don't accept that also, we're not getting the full weight, we're not getting the full picture, we're denying ourselves, we're missing out on the beauty of this prism. This prism, we can say, no, it's just Maya, or we can say, this is how the Divine Mother manifests herself in the world. And if we restrict ourselves just to this illumining aspect of the sun, of the light, and not seeing these other aspects, and after the sun can create everything, we see everything by the light of that sun. That pure light doesn't change on that side, and it can warm us, it can comfort us, it can make things grow. The light of the sun, so many things that it can do. These are all qualities that belong to it, even though it's colorless and formless. So both are true. This is what Sri Ramakrishna is trying to tell us, that both are true, and we should accept both of them. And the dualist who doesn't like this nirguna aspect is also not getting the full weight. The non-dualist who's sticking to, no, Brahman alone is real, and this world is Maya, illusion, not getting the full weight, the experience of living. And the beauty of this manifestation, and the tremendous variety within it. Now, Shankaracharya, sometimes I think is a little misunderstood, because he really didn't dismiss this world as just a dream. He has this theory of different levels of reality. This is called Vyavaharika, that it's a relative. Now, Sri Ramakrishna also, he uses that Nitya Lila distinction, that this is something relative. If Shankaracharya really felt this was a dream of no value, that it's just Maya, then why did he do everything that he did? He was one of the most influential reformists in all of India, bringing back the glory of Hindu tradition, temple worship, writing commentaries, writing different hymns and stotras and everything, and creating this monastic order that we belong to. The Dashanami Sampradaya. Why would he do all of that unless he felt that, no, there is some value to this world, but not ultimate, that it's changing and that it's relative that way, but not to be completely dismissed. There's some schools of Advaita Vedanta will do that, of course. They'll really, and some sadhus and everything, they won't do anything to get involved in this world because of attachment and everything. So, Sri Ramakrishna wanted us to embrace everything, and sometimes we restrict Shankaracharya too much to this Nirguna Brahman, because he also accepts this relative reality, at least, of the relative universe. So Sri Ramakrishna, he accepts this, the Paramarthika and Vyavaharika. He uses the terms Nitya and Leela. And this term Leela, it becomes much more beautiful. That it's not through Maya and delusion and everything, but this is the divine play of the Divine Mother. this lila. But from a philosophical point of view, it also means this relative reality. There was a conversation, and I tried to find it. I couldn't find it exactly. But M says something to Sri Ramakrishna about this lila, how this lila comes from the nitya, something like that. And Sri Ramakrishna corrects him. He says, no, the lila is also true. And we remember Swami Turiyananda, just before he passed away, who was a great Advaitin, but he made this great statement, Brahma Satyam, Jagat Satyam, that Brahman is real, this world is real, because he was a Vigyani. He saw that it was nothing but Brahman, saw Brahman everywhere. So from that sense, it was real. Thakur reverses everything. Somebody asks, is the world unreal? Unreal until you realize God. Because you see it as something separate, and it's really just this Brahman itself that you're seeing. Once you know that, then you know it's real. Then you know what it really means to be this world. So, my feeling is that this statement about this bell fruit has to be understood from an experiential point of view. Both the Vigyani and the sadhaka, those who are living in the world and take everything as real. We talk about Brahman alone is real. Who has any idea what this Brahman is? We're big talkers. With the Brahman is pure consciousness. How much does that mean to say Brahman is pure consciousness? That there's ultimate reality, nothing else, everything else is just a false appearance and all of that. When everything seems so real to us, and the Brahman, if we analyze it, is a concept, it's an idea, they're not even a very sharp and clear idea. Of course, we have great philosophers that they'll think that they know exactly what it is. Thakur will say it's one thing to read about this, it's one thing to understand it, another thing to experience it. Completely different thing to experience it. So I think Thakur is saying that don't restrict yourself. See, the Gyani, we have the three states of consciousness. And the Gyani will say that this waking state is just as unreal as the dream state. And we'll dismiss all of them. Turiya, that the state of being one with the Brahman is the only real state. Thakur says, I accept all three. Well, four we can say, but all of that he sees as a manifestation. He sees everything as this play, this lila, this divine play. And that's how he says that way we get the full weight of the bell fruit, if we accept all of these things. So this idea of not restricting ourselves, it has lots of applications. Thakur talks about the ancient rishis, and the ancient rishis will be really those who were following a very strict path of Jnana Yoga. And he says that they were so afraid of attachment, and so afraid of thinking that things are real and they'll form a relationship and everything. They would leave their ashram early morning. It's still dark out, no one else is there. They won't look right or left, they'll look down, they'll go and they'll spend all day in meditation and come back the same thing. So Thakur said that they were timid people. He's not saying that they can't reach the roof. He's not saying that, but he said they were timid people. He liked the expert dice player. They have all these games where if you have to get a certain number, and he said, give me a 6, and he rolls and he gets a 6. He liked those. So this nivritti and pravritti. Also, if we do only nivritti, only withdrawing from the world, and not experiencing the world, we don't get the full weight. So we see this with Swamiji, of course, that even in our monastic tradition, how we engage ourselves in social service work and in preaching and other things to be of some benefit to others, and then we get full experience of life. Now, in the beginning, we have to hedge ourselves around. We have to be careful because we can get attached and everything, but Thakur liked this idea that we be a little bit bold And we don't just sit all day long with our eyes closed. It's a great statement. He says, will you only see God with your eyes closed? Can't you see God with your eyes open also? Just with eyes closed, we're not getting the full weight of the bell fruit. So we can take this concept and apply it to our own self and to other people. If we follow this strict Advaita Vedanta, then I'm not this body, I'm not this mind, I'm not the senses, I'm not the personality, this ego. We get rid of all of that, and I'm just pure consciousness, I'm just the witness. Now we can understand pure consciousness from that point of view, that I've been observing myself and all the changes and everything, and this is my real nature. So we have that point of view. We see everybody else as just the self. All of these coverings are false coverings. And we also have this idea that if we love somebody, why do we love them? We read in the Upanishads, why does the husband love the wife? Why does the wife love the husband? On account of the self within. It's interpreted in different ways, but Swamiji takes it on account of the self. Now, of course, if we don't feel that the other person is a living, conscious human being, that the other person has awareness, we can't possibly love. We won't love a robot or anything. But is it only that? Is it not the personality? Is it not the sweetness and the kindness and the goodness, or even sometimes the bad temper and the funny sense of humor and all of that attracts us and appeals to us? Do we want to eliminate that? We don't get the full weight. Even with the avatar, if we meditate and worship the avatar from the point of view only as this is God incarnate, that this is the same, we were worshiping the same Narayana, that this is that same pure Brahman, that pure consciousness that illumines the heart. If we worship that way, we're also not getting the full picture. There's a beautiful dhyana mantra written by Swami Atmajnananda that we recite every morning. It's part of the daily puja, the dhyana mantra, that it starts out, Hridaya kamara madhye rachitam nirvikalpam sadasada kila bhedatitam ekaswarup. That we start out, that we're meditating on that divine presence that Sri Ramakrishna is manifest there as pure awareness, as that infinite absolute reality, all different descriptions that we get of Brahman itself. So there's 3 verses. The first 2 are all about this transcendent, pure oneness with Brahman, all of that. Then we get to the 3rd verse. He took human birth. He did it for us. He did it to distribute this love and devotion and peace and calmness and wisdom and knowledge. This is why he took that human birth. Praniya galita chittam jivaduka asahishnam. His heart melted. It melted. And he couldn't bear to see the suffering of human beings. Yeah? And though he was established in samadhi, he had this softness to him, this tenderness to him. If we don't look at that human aspect, then we're not getting the full weight. It's not just that this perfect manifestation of the divine presence within, shining through, but it's shining through that personality. Look at Holy Mother. Do we love Holy Mother just because there's some special divinity within her? No, it was that motherhood. It was that tremendous unselfish love that she had, looking upon everyone as her own child. So if we eliminate that, then we're not getting the full weight. So I think really that Thakur was trying to explain all of this with this idea of getting the full weight of the bell fruit. He wasn't taking any special philosophical position with regard to the relationship of God and the world and the self and Brahman and all of that. I take it that way. Now, there's one final point, and that is that we can take this bell fruit, we can crack it open, We can analyze it. We can see the hard outer shell is there. We can see the flesh is there. We can see the seeds are there. We can separate them, have 3 separate things there. We can weigh them. And we're completely missing the point of the bell fruit. We have to take the flesh and we have to blend it, and we have to turn it into that very sweet, cooling bell fruit sherbet, and we have to drink it. This is exactly what Sri Ramakrishna said about the mangoes, that we can analyze these things day and night. Unless we drink it, unless we eat the mangoes, then we're missing the whole point. So this is really what we have to do. It's good to think about these things, and it's good to understand these different philosophical positions to a certain point. Otherwise, we have to do our practice, and we have to somehow be able to have that direct experience. And it's only when we can drink the juice of the bell fruit that really our lives will become blessed, and we'll really accomplish what we're meant to accomplish in this lifetime. So I really like this analogy of the bell fruit. It's very helpful in so many ways. I just think that if we take it too literally, and we try to pigeonhole Sri Ramakrishna, and not just with this bell fruit, but all the other examples, if we take them out of context or just see them in that, and that we really won't understand that Thakur is trying to tell us, that have that direct experience, that don't restrict anything, accept everything, don't get attached, know what's of lasting value and what's not of lasting value, what's transitory, and understand all of that, but have some type of direct experience. So this is the analysis of the bell fruit. So let's take a few minutes and sit in some quiet reflection.